A wife and a homeschooling mother of three. She was raised in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, if you can believe that. One of the rare conservative enclaves of the Northeast. And then she relocated to God's country, Texas, 6 years ago. Only recently politically active, she admits she was asleep until an unwarranted investigation by federal officials led her to question just how secure liberty really is in America. Believe me, they messed with the wrong person. And they lit a fire in Jessica. Mrs. Hughes has been active from the beginning of the Tea Party movement and recently completed her first book, Revolt, A Mandate to Restore the Constitution. I'm honored to introduce Mrs. Jessica Hughes.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you all. We're all taught as school children that the rallying cry of the revolutionary colonies was no taxation without representation, which is true, but this selective history is convenient to the powers that be because it mollifies us. It allows us to believe when we're discontented that all we have to do is wait for that next election and maybe our representative will get in and he'll treat our wallets a little nicer. Even now, our chief complaint seems to be that the people we elect don't represent us the way we want them to. We get them out there, and instead of doing the bidding of the people, they do the bidding of whoever is going to give them the biggest campaign contributions. I think we all know that's not you or me. Far less, perhaps nothing, is said of consent anymore, and it's consent I want to speak of today. The most straightforward thing you could say about the concept of consent is that it's always voluntary. There can't ever be consent under conditions where you couldn't reasonably withdraw or refuse. If I were to say to you, may I have $1 out of every 3 you earn, and you say yes, knowing full well you could safely say no, then thank you, you have consented to give me 1/3 of your wealth. But if I make the same request, and I tell you very clearly that an answer of no will result in you being arrested, thrown in prison, your property confiscated, your children sent to be wards of the state, and your reputation destroyed, then you have no more consented than a woman who donates her diamonds to a mugger in an alley. Our Declaration of Independence lists the grievances against King George that the colonists felt were severe enough to warrant completely severing themselves from their government of the time. Only once in this list are taxes mentioned, and nothing is said of representation. It says, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. And of course, there's the famous phrase in the preamble, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I really want you all to ask yourselves today a question that I think most of us never consider. Do you consent? And how? And why? Have we consented simply because of where we're born? Am I to believe that because I am blessed to be born here, where my lungs thrive on the sweet air of liberty, then I have consented to be enslaved by the usurpers in Washington? What more gross distortion of our foundational ideals could there possibly be? To claim that the greatness of America is that she is founded with the consent of the governed, and then to tell us that out of gratitude for this great freedom, we must happily make ourselves chattel to men who would rule us. And should we refuse this great honor, well then, we're criminals and traitors, and we should be thrown into prison. How has it come to this? Jefferson said, our attachment to no nation on earth should supplant our attachment to liberty. Now, do I love this nation? Oh, yes, I do. I believe in American exceptionalism. But I also believe that we have forgotten what made us exceptional. It was not a demigod president living in some modern-day Greek temple with hundreds of aides and surrounded by a small army, because heaven knows if something happened to the president, the entire society would crumble. What would we do with ourselves? It wasn't the pomp and the circumstance. It certainly wasn't respecting the office, no matter what criminal or degenerate occupied it at the time. Those things might make America look powerful and good to other nations, but it did not make this nation good. What made us good was the individuals who lived from day to day, laboring, winning, losing, contracting with one another, living and dying, always with the knowledge that their life was their own, that they owed fealty to no one but their God, knowing that even the president was just a man like them, and with or without him, their lives would go on in the same way because they were their own masters. It wasn't a gargantuan military, replete with stars and bars and parades and generals and the biggest, baddest weapons in the world. Those things may have made us successful militarily, but they were not what made us an exceptional nation. That was the bravery, the courage, and the honor of individuals who fought in places they didn't want to be for a freedom that they would and often did die for. They made us exceptional. It was not the nation at all. In fact, this might not make me popular, but there was no nation to speak of until Lincoln created it at the point of a gun. And today, the man who said that if it would save the Union, he would do it by never freeing a single slave, this man is celebrated as a great emancipator. Well, Lysander Spooner, a true abolitionist, who wrote of the unconstitutionality of slavery, who tried very hard to show how a peaceful end could be brought to the atrocity of servitude. He said that if the North prevailed, there would not be fewer slaves, but more. Because he said if the North prevailed, all pretense of consent would be stripped away from our constitutional republic, and forevermore, men in this land would be political slaves. So it is not the nation. It is not the arbitrary boundaries that have been drawn and redrawn throughout the decades that make us exceptional. They only make us identifiable. It is only our ideals that make us exceptional. The belief that each man is his own master, that all men are created equal, and therefore no man, however many votes he wins in some popularity contest, has the right to rule over another of us without our consent. Now, those of us in the Tea Party movement have received a lot of criticisms, and I think that the one that stings the most, because we do so love our country and her ideals, is when we're told that we're anti-government. We're called so many things, but there's some way that we conflate the government with America. We feel like if we're told that we're anti-government, then we don't love our country. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to be offended anymore if someone calls me anti-government, because I am proudly pro-consent. And I want to tell you that whatever assumptions may have been made about my consent, on the day that I was born under the jurisdiction of the Ponzi scheme that has become the Washington bureaucracy, I hereby withdraw my consent. They may continue to take my money, and I will probably continue to follow most of their ridiculous regulations. But let it be known, it is only for fear of their prisons and for love of my family.